Sarah Mitchell had always prided herself on maintaining the perfect home. After 15 years of working as a successful architectural designer in downtown Seattle, she had finally saved enough to buy her dream house, a charming colonial-style home in the peaceful suburb of Pine Valley, complete with a custom-built 3-car garage that housed her prized classic car collection. Life was exactly as she had imagined it, until one spring morning when the sound of heavy machinery tore through her tranquil neighborhood, and she watched in horror as an HOA crew began demolishing her garage without warning. All to build a playground she never approved. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The day had started like any other. Sarah was enjoying her morning coffee on her wraparound porch, appreciating the meticulous landscaping she had invested in over the past 2 years. Her property stood out in the neighborhood, with its perfectly manicured lawn, heritage rose garden, and the custom-built garage that matched the classic architecture of her home. The garage wasn't just a structure, it was a testament to her passion for automotive restoration and housed 3 vintage Mustangs she had painstakingly rebuilt over the years. Pine Valley Woods, her chosen neighborhood, had appealed to her precisely because it wasn't part of any homeowners association. The freedom to design and modify her property as she saw fit had been a crucial factor in her decision to purchase here. The surrounding community was a mix of well-maintained homes, each with its own distinct character, free from the cookie-cutter conformity often imposed by HOAs. Sarah had spent countless weekends in that garage, restoring her cars and hosting monthly meetings of the local classic car club. It had become more than just a storage space. It was her sanctuary, a place where she could escape the pressures of her high-stress job and pursue her passion for automotive restoration. That peaceful existence shattered at 7:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, in April, when the thunderous roar of construction equipment jolted her awake. Looking out her bedroom window, she froze in disbelief. A massive yellow bulldozer was positioning itself in front of her garage, while a crew in orange vests, marked with Brightview HOA services, began setting up construction barriers around her property. Without even changing out of her pajamas, Sarah rushed outside, waving her arms frantically. "Stop! What do you think you're doing?" she shouted, her voice barely audible over the machinery. But before she could reach them, the bulldozer's blade made contact with the garage door, metal crumpling like paper under its force. Her heart racing, Sarah watched in horror as pieces of her beloved garage and the precious vehicles inside were reduced to rubble. The construction crew seemed unmoved by her presence, continuing their work with mechanical efficiency. One worker approached her, clipboard in hand, wearing a badge that identified him as Mark Thompson, project manager. "Ma'am, we have all the necessary approvals for the new community playground project," he stated matter-of-factly, as if he were discussing something as trivial as mowing a lawn. "This area has been designated as the optimal location for the new recreation facility." Sarah's mind reeled. Playground approvals? She had never agreed to any of this, never signed any documents, never even received a notice. More importantly, she wasn't part of any HOA. How could they possibly have the authority to destroy her property? There must be some mistake, she managed to say, her voice shaking with a mixture of shock and rage. "I'm not part of any HOA. This is my private property, and those are my classic cars you're destroying." Thompson's expression flickered briefly with uncertainty, but he quickly composed himself. "According to our records, this property falls within the jurisdiction of the Brightview Valley HOA. All residents were notified of the upcoming community improvement project." He shuffled through his papers, pulling out a document. "The vote passed unanimously at last month's meeting. Sarah stared at him in disbelief. She had never received any notification, never attended any meeting, and certainly never voted on any playground project. As she watched another section of her garage crumble, she knew this was just the beginning of what would become the biggest fight of her life. The 2 years leading up to that devastating morning had been everything Sarah had dreamed of. Her life in Pine Valley Woods had fallen into a comfortable rhythm, filled with the kind of peace and fulfillment she had always sought. Every weekend, the sound of gentle tinkering and classic rock music would drift from her garage as she worked on her beloved cars, a hobby that had become her signature in the neighborhood. Her property had become something of a local landmark, drawing admiring glances from passers-by and fellow car enthusiasts. The 3-car garage, with its matching colonial architecture and custom wooden doors, had been featured twice in Classic Car Collector magazine, showcasing her 1965 Mustang Fastback, 1967 Shelby GT500, and her pride and joy, a rare 1969 Boss 429 that she had spent 3 years restoring to its original glory. Sarah had cultivated strong relationships with her neighbors, particularly the elderly couple next door, the Hendersons, who often brought her homemade cookies while she worked in the garage. Mr. Henderson, a retired mechanic himself, would sometimes spend hours sharing stories about cars he had worked on in his youth. They had become like family, looking out for each other's properties and sharing holiday meals together. The neighborhood itself was a testament to individuality. Unlike the cookie-cutter developments springing up around Seattle, Pine Valley Woods had character. Each home told its own story, from Martha Wilson's Victorian-style garden paradise 3 doors down to Tom Garcia's contemporary masterpiece at the corner. The absence of an HOA meant that homeowners could express their personalities through their properties, creating a vibrant tapestry of architectural styles and landscaping choices. Sarah's weekly routine had become comfortably predictable. Weekdays were devoted to her architectural design firm, where she had made a name for herself designing sustainable commercial spaces. But weekends belonged to her garage. Saturday mornings usually started with a cup of coffee on her porch, planning the day's restoration work. The local classic car club would meet at her place every 3rd Sunday, transforming her driveway into a mini car show that attracted enthusiasts from across the state. She had even started teaching basic car maintenance workshops for neighborhood teenagers, sharing her passion with the next generation. The garage had become more than just a storage space. It was a community hub, a teaching space, and her personal sanctuary all rolled into one. The relationships she built through these workshops had strengthened her connections within the community, making Pine Valley Woods feel truly like home. The freedom to pursue her passion without restriction had been a crucial factor in choosing this neighborhood. Sarah had specifically avoided HOA-controlled communities during her house hunt, having heard horror stories from clients about arbitrary rules and excessive control. In Pine Valley Woods, she found a place where she could build her dream without interference, where her garage could be both a workspace and a showpiece. Her property improvements had even inspired others in the neighborhood. The Jeffersons across the street had built a greenhouse that matched their home's architecture, while the Murphys, 2 doors down, had installed a beautiful koi pond. The neighborhood had developed an unofficial tradition of supporting each other's home improvement projects, sharing tools, advice, and sometimes just moral support. Life had settled into such a comfortable pattern that Sarah had recently started planning an expansion of her garage workspace. She had drawn up preliminary plans to add a small workshop area where she could host more formal restoration classes. The Hendersons had enthusiastically supported the idea, seeing it as another way to bring the community together. The only occasional disturbance to this peaceful existence came from rumors of development companies eyeing the neighborhood for potential acquisition. But these rumors had always seemed distant and unlikely to affect their tight-knit community. The residents of Pine Valley Woods had felt secure in their independence, proud of their diverse and personalized homes. Looking back, Sarah would later realize that she had perhaps become too comfortable, too trusting in the stability of her situation. The signs of impending trouble, the occasional suited figures taking photos of properties, the mysterious surveys being conducted, the subtle pressure from real estate agents suggesting that the neighborhood needed updating, had been there. But in the contentment of her daily routine, focused on her cars and her community, she had missed these warning signals entirely. Those peaceful days of tinkering in her garage, sharing stories with neighbors, and building her dream life would soon feel like a distant memory. But for those 2 years, Sarah had lived her perfect life, never imagining that everything she had built could be threatened so suddenly and so drastically. The first hint that something was amiss came 3 days before the demolition, though Sarah wouldn't recognize its significance until it was too late. She had noticed an unusual number of cars slowly driving past her house, their occupants taking photos with professional cameras. At first, she had assumed they were classic car enthusiasts, admiring her collection through the garage's wide windows. It wouldn't have been the first time people had stopped to appreciate her restored vehicles, but these observers were different. They wore business attire, carried clipboards, and seemed more interested in measuring distances and taking notes than admiring her cars. One particular group caught her attention: 3 men in expensive suits standing at the edge of her property, gesturing toward her garage while speaking in hushed tones. When Sarah had walked out to inquire about their interest, they quickly dispersed, climbing into a black Mercedes SUV with tinted windows. That same evening, she found a peculiar envelope in her mailbox. It wasn't posted through regular mail. No stamps or postmarks, just a plain white envelope with resident typed on the front. Inside was a glossy brochure showcasing a planned community development called Brightview Valley Estates. The images depicted rows of identical houses, manicured communal spaces, and most notably, a large central playground complex with water features and modern play equipment. Sarah had tossed the brochure aside, thinking it was just another developer's attempt to buy up property in the area. Their neighborhood had received similar promotional materials before, all of which had been collectively ignored by the residents who valued their independence and property rights. The next day, while working on her Boss 429's transmission, Sarah noticed more unusual activity. A survey crew was working their way down the street, placing markers and taking measurements. When they reached her property, they seemed particularly interested in the area around her garage, placing several bright orange stakes in her lawn. Sarah had stepped out to question their presence, but they claimed to be conducting a routine municipal survey and showed her what appeared to be official documentation, just updating the city's records, one surveyor had said, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Nothing to worry about, ma'am. That evening, during her usual walk with the Hendersons, Mrs. Henderson mentioned that she had received strange phone calls from someone claiming to represent a homeowners association. They kept insisting we needed to attend some meeting about community improvements, she had said, her voice tinged with concern. But you know as well as I do that we've never had an HOA here. The most disturbing incident occurred the night before the demolition. Sarah had been working late in her garage, changing the oil in her Shelby GT500, when she heard voices outside. Peering through the window, she spotted 2 men in dark clothing examining her garage doors, taking measurements and photos with their phones. When she flicked on the exterior lights, they quickly walked away, disappearing into a waiting vehicle. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Something about their behavior had unsettled her enough that she'd called the local police non-emergency line. The responding officer had driven by, but found nothing suspicious, suggesting that they were probably just admirers of her cars. Still, Sarah had difficulty sleeping that night, an inexplicable sense of unease keeping her awake. She had even gone so far as to email her real estate agent, asking if there had been any changes to the neighborhood's zoning or status that she should know about. The agent's response had been reassuring. Pine Valley Woods remained an independent, non-HOA community, just as it had been when she purchased her home. In retrospect, all these incidents were clearly connected, pieces of a puzzle that would soon come together in the most devastating way possible. The photographers, the surveyors, the mysterious brochure, the strange phone calls to her neighbors, and the nighttime visitors, all were precursors to what would unfold the next morning. That night, Sarah had stayed up later than usual, researching local zoning laws and property rights on her laptop. Something about the day's events had triggered her professional instincts as an architect. She had even drafted an email to her lawyer asking about the legal implications of unauthorized surveys on private property, but had decided to wait until morning to send it. It was a decision she would soon regret deeply. As she finally drifted off to sleep, the garage lights still visible through her bedroom window, Sarah had no way of knowing that it would be the last time she would see her beloved structure intact. The quiet darkness of that night held no hint of the chaos that would erupt with the morning sun, no warning of the battle that was about to begin for her property rights, and the preservation of everything she had worked so hard to build. Sarah's confrontation with Mark Thompson and the demolition crew quickly escalated into a chaotic scene. Still in her pajamas, she positioned herself between the bulldozer and what remained of her garage's eastern wall, her hands trembling, but her voice growing stronger with rage. The morning sun cast long shadows across her property as neighbors began emerging from their homes, drawn by the commotion. "You need to stop this right now," Sarah demanded, pulling out her phone and starting to record. "I'm calling the police, and I'm calling my lawyer. This is criminal destruction of private property." The bulldozer operator hesitated, looking uncertainly toward Thompson for direction. Thompson maintained his bureaucratic demeanor, though a bead of sweat had formed on his forehead. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but if you don't step aside, we'll have to call security to remove you. We have strict deadlines to meet for this community improvement project." By now, the Hendersons had rushed over from next door. Mr. Henderson, already on his phone with the local police. Other neighbors gathered at the edges of Sarah's property, many filming the scene with their phones. Martha Wilson, the retired judge from 3 houses down, pushed through the growing crowd. "I'm a former Superior Court judge," Martha announced, her authoritative voice cutting through the chaos. "And I can tell you right now that without proper documentation and the owner's consent, this demolition is illegal. Show me your permits." Right now, Thompson's confident facade cracked slightly as he flipped through his clipboard. "We have all the necessary approvals from the Brightview Valley HOA board. This property falls under their jurisdiction as of last month's annexation." "Annexation?" Sarah's voice rose in disbelief. "This is the first I'm hearing about any annexation. I never received any notification, never signed any documents. You can't just declare authority over private property." The sound of police sirens grew closer as Thompson produced a stack of papers, showing them to Sarah and Martha. The documents appeared official at first glance, with letterhead reading Brightview Valley Homeowners Association and various stamps and signatures. But as Martha examined them more closely, she pointed out several discrepancies. "These documents aren't even properly notarized," Martha declared, her years of legal experience evident in her tone. "And the property descriptions don't match the county records. This is completely invalid." 2 police cruisers pulled up to the scene, and officers Chen and Rodriguez quickly took control of the situation. They ordered the construction crew to cease all activities immediately while they assessed the situation. Sarah's hands shook as she showed them photos of her garage from just days before, including the classic cars that were now partially buried under rubble. "Those cars alone are worth over $300,000, she explained, her voice cracking. "The Boss 429 is one of only 900 ever made. It took me 3 years to restore it." Officer Chen nodded grimly, taking detailed notes. While her partner began documenting the scene with photos, Thompson attempted to assert his authority again, approaching the officers with his clipboard of documents. "Officers, we have all the required permissions. This is a legally approved community improvement project." "Sir, step back," Officer Rodriguez commanded firmly. "We're going to need to see permits issued by the city, not just HOA documentation. And we'll need proof that the property owner was properly notified and consented to this demolition." Sarah's lawyer, David Martinez, arrived 20 minutes later, having dropped everything to respond to her urgent call. He took one look at the scene and immediately began preparing for legal action. "This is going to be a major lawsuit," he muttered, photographing the destruction and collecting contact information from witnessing neighbors. The growing crowd of neighbors had become increasingly vocal in their support of Sarah. Tom Garcia, who lived on the corner, spoke up about receiving similar threatening letters from the supposed HOA. Others shared stories of mysterious surveyors and unauthorized property assessments in recent weeks. As the morning wore on, local news vans began arriving, drawn by calls from concerned residents. Sarah found herself giving an impromptu interview, still in her pajamas, trying to maintain her composure as she explained how she'd watched helplessly while her precious garage and classic cars were destroyed without warning or permission. "I built my life here specifically because this neighborhood wasn't controlled by an HOA, she told the reporters, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "I checked every legal document when I bought this property. There was no HOA then, and there isn't one now. Someone is trying to force their authority over our neighborhood, and they're willing to destroy private property to do it." The construction crew, realizing the gravity of the situation, began packing up their equipment under the watchful eyes of the police. Thompson made several agitated phone calls, his earlier confidence replaced by visible concern as he paced back and forth on the sidewalk. By mid-morning, Sarah's property had become a crime scene, with yellow police tape surrounding the demolished garage and detectives arriving to assess the damage. The sight of her destroyed garage and damaged classic cars made her physically ill, but she forced herself to document everything meticulously, knowing this was just the beginning of a long fight. The next 48 hours became a blur of phone, calls, meetings, and mounting frustration as Sarah attempted to navigate the bureaucratic maze that followed the destruction of her garage. Seated in the city's municipal building, she found herself surrounded by stacks of paperwork and facing a succession of officials who seemed more interested in avoiding responsibility than providing answers. "I'm sorry, Ms. Mitchell, but according to our records, there's no registered HOA for Pine Valley Woods," said Barbara Collins, the grey-haired clerk in the property records department, peering at her computer screen through thick glasses. "However, we do have a pending application for community rezoning filed by Brightview Development Corporation." Sarah leaned forward, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "Pending application? When was this filed?" Barbara clicked through several screens. "The initial paperwork was submitted 3 months ago, but it's still under review. There's certainly nothing here that would authorize any construction or demolition." She frowned, adjusting her glasses, and definitely nothing that would grant them HOA authority over existing properties. Clutching this new information, Sarah moved on to her next appointment at the city planning office. The space was a fluorescent-lit maze of cubicles where she met with Gerald Watson, a balding man in his 50s who seemed more interested in his coffee than her situation. "Look, Ms. Mitchell," he sighed, barely glancing at the photos of her demolished garage. "These situations are always complicated. Yes, the demolition wasn't properly permitted, but Brightview Development has submitted comprehensive plans for neighborhood improvement. Their proposal includes parks, playgrounds, improved infrastructure." "I don't care about their proposals," Sarah interrupted, her patience wearing thin. "They destroyed my property without permission. They crushed 3 classic cars." "How did they even get demolition equipment on site without permits?" Gerald shuffled uncomfortably in his chair. "Well, they did have some preliminary approvals for survey work. But you're right. They shouldn't have proceeded with any demolition without final permits and homeowner consent. I suggest you file a formal complaint with our enforcement division." The enforcement division, as it turned out, was located in another building entirely. By the time Sarah arrived, she had already missed lunch, and her frustration had reached new heights. The office was nearly empty, save for a young clerk who seemed overwhelmed by her situation. "You'll need to fill out forms CD 103, PR 2117, and the property damage assessment report," he explained, printing out a stack of papers. "Then you'll need signatures from the zoning board, which meets every other Thursday, and validation from the property records department. But you'll need to submit those in person at the main office downtown." Sarah stared at the growing pile of forms. "My garage was illegally demolished yesterday. 3 classic cars were destroyed. Surely there's a faster way to address this." The clerk shrugged apologetically. "You could try the emergency construction violation hotline, but they usually only handle active construction issues." Running on coffee and determination, Sarah spent the rest of the afternoon bouncing between offices, collecting business cards, and filling out countless forms. Each department seemed to point to another, creating a circular maze of bureaucracy that left her feeling increasingly helpless. It wasn't until she reached the county recorder's office that she finally found someone who seemed genuinely concerned about her situation. Linda Martinez, a veteran clerk with 30 years of experience, listened intently to Sarah's story. "Something's not right here," Linda said, pulling up multiple databases. "Brightview Development has been trying to acquire properties in several neighborhoods around the city. They submit paperwork for community improvements, but what they're really doing is forcing out homeowners who don't want to sell." Linda lowered her voice, glancing around the empty office. "Just last month, they pulled something similar in Oak Ridge, claimed they had HOA authority, started making changes without permission. Several homeowners complained, but by the time the legal issues were sorted out, many had given up and sold their properties." This information sent a chill down Sarah's spine. So this is their strategy: create chaos and hope people give up. "Exactly," Linda nodded, printing several documents. "Here's everything I have on Brightview's recent activities. And here's my direct number. If you find anything else suspicious, let me know. Some of us still care about doing things right." As Sarah left the county building, the sun was already setting. Her phone showed dozens of missed calls from neighbors, her lawyer, and several news outlets seeking comments. But among the notifications was an email that made her blood boil, an official-looking message from Brightview Valley HOA with the subject line, "Notice of Community Improvements, Phase 2 Pending." She opened the email to find a detailed schedule of upcoming improvements planned for the neighborhood, including the demolition of several other structures deemed non-compliant with community standards. A garage, it seemed, had just been the beginning. Sitting in her car in the parking lot, Sarah felt a mix of exhaustion and renewed determination. The day's bureaucratic runaround had been frustrating, but she'd also gathered valuable information and found at least one ally within the system. More importantly, she now understood that this wasn't just about her garage. It was about protecting her entire neighborhood from a predatory development scheme. She pulled out her phone and began typing a message to her neighbors, calling for an emergency community meeting. If Brightview thought they could wear down the residents of Pine Valley Woods through bureaucratic tactics and intimidation, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The community meeting Sarah organized took place in her living room. That evening, but before it began, she dedicated herself to methodically documenting everything. Setting up her laptop on her dining room table, which now overlooked the ruins of her garage through the window, she began creating a detailed timeline of events. Working with the precision she'd developed in her years as an architectural designer, Sarah started categorizing every piece of evidence she had collected. Her dining room transformed into an impromptu command center, with documents spread across the table and photos taped to the walls. The Hendersons had brought over their security camera footage, which had captured the entire demolition from their side angle. "Look at this," Sarah said to Martha Wilson, who had arrived early to help organize the evidence. She played back footage from her phone showing the demolition crew's arrival. They started at exactly 7:30 a.m., when most people would be getting ready for work or taking kids to school. This wasn't random timing. Martha nodded, making notes. Classic tactic. They chose a time when they thought there would be minimal resistance. Did you notice they also parked their trucks to block the view from the street? Sarah pulled up the photos she'd taken of Thompson's documents. Using her architectural software, she began analyzing the supposed HOA paperwork, highlighting discrepancies in property lines and zoning descriptions. The letterhead on the documents claimed Brightview Valley HOA had been established 3 months ago, but the paper stock and printing showed signs of being much more recent. "These coordinates don't even match our neighborhood," Sarah pointed out, comparing them to official county maps. "They're off by almost half a mile. Either this is incredibly sloppy work, or they're deliberately creating confusion." "Martha," he finished, making it harder to challenge their authority by mixing up property descriptions. Sarah's doorbell rang continuously as more neighbors arrived, each bringing their own pieces to the puzzle. Tom Garcia had saved every suspicious letter he'd received in the past month. The Patels from 2 streets over brought security footage showing the same survey crew that had marked Sarah's property trespassing in their backyard late at night. Working methodically, Sarah created digital copies of everything, organizing them into categories: unauthorized surveys, suspicious communications, witness statements, and photographic evidence. She was particularly careful documenting the damage to her classic cars, taking detailed photos of each vehicle's VIN number and the impact points from the demolition. "We need to document the financial impact too," her lawyer David Martinez advised over speakerphone. "Not just the property damage, but potential loss of value to your home, the car's collectible status, even the community impact of losing a gathering space for car enthusiasts." Sarah pulled out her insurance documents and recent appraisals for the vehicles. The Boss 429 alone had been valued at $175,000 after its restoration. She had documentation of every part she'd replaced, every hour she'd spent restoring it, even magazine articles featuring the car. "Don't forget the emotional impact," Mrs. Henderson suggested quietly, placing a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Those weren't just cars in that garage. That space meant something to this community." Sarah nodded, fighting back tears as she added another category to her documentation: community impact statements. She began collecting written statements from neighborhood kids who had learned basic car maintenance in her garage, fellow enthusiasts who had attended her monthly car club meetings, and neighbors who had benefited from her automotive expertise. As the evidence mounted, patterns began emerging. The timeline revealed a calculated escalation. First came the suspicious drive-bys and photos, then the surveyors, followed by unofficial communications, And finally, the destructive action. It wasn't random. It was a systematic attempt to undermine their neighborhood's independence. "Look at this," Tom Garcia called out, comparing the brochure Sarah had received with one that had been delivered to his house. "The playground they're supposedly building. The dimensions would require demolishing not just Sarah's garage, but part of the Hendersons' property too. They're planning to take over the whole block." Sarah quickly added this revelation to her documentation, scanning both brochures and marking the discrepancies. She also noted how the brochures carefully avoided mentioning any specific dates or contact information, making it difficult to track their source. Using her professional software, she created a 3D model of the neighborhood, overlaying the proposed improvements with existing property lines. The result was shocking. Brightview's plans would effectively eliminate most of the neighborhood's unique architectural features, replacing them with standardized structures and communal spaces nobody had asked for. "This isn't about building a playground," Sarah realized, staring at the completed overlay. "They're trying to force us to sell by making it impossible to maintain our properties as they are." As the evening wore on, Sarah organized all the digital evidence onto encrypted drives, creating multiple backups. She knew from her professional experience that documentation could make or break a case, and she was determined to build an ironclad record of everything that had happened. The final piece came when Linda Martinez from the county recorder's office sent over an urgent email. Attached were records showing similar patterns of behavior by Brightview Development in other neighborhoods across the state. Sarah added these to her growing database, seeing how their tactics had evolved and become more aggressive over time. By midnight, her dining room walls were covered in timeline charts, property maps, and photographic evidence. It wasn't just documentation anymore. It was ammunition for the fight ahead. Sarah saved everything to a secure cloud drive, made physical copies for key documents, and prepared packages for both her lawyer and the police. Looking at the organized evidence, she felt a grim satisfaction. Brightview might have destroyed her garage, but in doing so, they'd given her the weapons she needed to fight back. Every document, every photo, every witness statement was another nail in their legal coffin, and she was just getting started. At dawn the next morning, while photographing the demolition site one final time before the insurance adjusters arrived, Sarah noticed something peculiar in the rubble. Amidst the broken concrete and twisted metal of her beloved garage, a flash of white caught her eye. Carefully making her way through the debris, she discovered a dropped folder, its contents partially scattered among the wreckage. The folder's label had been partially torn off, but the letters BVPH3 were still visible. Inside, Sarah found something that made her breath catch. Detailed architectural drawings, but not just for a playground. The plans showed an extensive development project, complete with underground parking structures and commercial spaces, spanning not just her property, but the entire neighborhood. "Mrs. Henderson," Sarah called out to her neighbor, who was already up tending to her morning roses. "Can you come look at this?" The elderly woman made her way over, carefully stepping around the debris. Together, they examined the documents. The plans were far more elaborate than anything Brightview had publicly disclosed. Instead of a simple playground, the drawings revealed a massive mixed-use development that would essentially erase their neighborhood's character entirely. "Look at these dates," Sarah pointed to the corner of one blueprint. "These were drawn up 6 months ago. They've been planning this long before they started pressuring anyone. But it was what they found beneath the blueprints that truly set off alarm bells. A series of emails, partially muddy but still readable, revealed communications between Brightview Development and several city officials. The discussions centered around expedited rezoning and minimal resident notification requirements. "This isn't right," Mrs. Henderson muttered, her normally gentle face hardening. "They're talking about us like we're obstacles to be removed, not homeowners with rights." Sarah's phone buzzed. It was Martha Wilson, the retired judge. "Sarah, you need to come see this. Remember those surveyors? Well, I just found something interesting in my backyard." 15 minutes later, Sarah stood in Martha's meticulously maintained backyard, staring at a series of small metal markers embedded in the ground. They were barely visible among the grass, but once you knew what to look for, a pattern emerged. "They've been marking properties throughout the neighborhood," Martha explained, pointing out the systematic placement. "But look at this." She held up one of the markers she'd managed to pull from the ground. Unlike typical survey markers, these had small electronic components attached to their bases. Sarah examined the device closely, her engineering background kicking in. These aren't just markers, they're sensors of some kind. But what are they monitoring? The answer came from an unexpected source. Tom Garcia, who worked in IT, offered to analyze one of the devices. Within an hour, he'd made a disturbing discovery. "They're collecting data," he explained, showing them the readings on his laptop. "Ground stability, water table levels, subsurface composition. This is the kind of environmental monitoring you'd need for major construction work. Way more than you'd need for a playground." Sarah felt her stomach twist. "They're not just planning to build on the surface. They're preparing for deep foundation work, the kind you'd need for high-rise buildings," Martha finished grimly. "They're planning to turn our neighborhood into a commercial district." Returning to the demolition site, Sarah began looking at the rubble with new eyes. The way the bulldozer had attacked her garage wasn't just destructive, it was precise, almost as if they were testing the ground beneath it. She remembered the crew's unusual interest in certain areas of her property during the demolition. Using her phone, she began mapping the placement of debris, noting patterns that seemed odd for a simple demolition. Why had they dug so deep in certain spots? Why were there unusual markings on some of the concrete fragments? The answer came when she found another partially buried sensor near where her garage's foundation had been. This one was different from the others, more sophisticated, with what appeared to be soil sampling capabilities. Sarah carefully documented everything, adding these new discoveries to her growing evidence file. But she couldn't shake the feeling that they'd only scratched the surface of Brightview's true plans. Later that afternoon, while reviewing the found documents with David Martinez over video call, another detail caught their attention. In the corner of one blueprint was a small notation, Phase 3, BV Master Plan. If this is Phase 3, David mused, what were Phases 1 and 2? Sarah pulled up county records on her laptop, cross-referencing other neighborhoods where Brightview had been active. A pattern emerged. Similar community improvement projects in other areas, all following the same playbook. Mysterious HOA, takeovers, forced demolitions, and eventually complete neighborhood transformations. They're not just targeting our neighborhood, Sarah realized. This is part of a larger plan to reshape the entire district. They're doing it piece by piece, neighborhood by neighborhood, hoping nobody connects the dots. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about one garage or one playground. It was about systematic property seizure on a massive scale, disguised as community improvement. And somehow, they'd managed to keep it quiet until now. As Sarah stared at the growing web of evidence, she knew she'd stumbled onto something much bigger and more dangerous than she'd initially thought. The question now was, how many others were involved, and how far would they go to keep their plans hidden? The sound of expensive tires on gravel announced their arrival. Sarah looked up from her documentation to see 3 black SUVs pulling up to her property, their tinted windows reflecting the late morning sun. From the lead vehicle emerged a woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal grey suit, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. 2 men in dark suits flanked her as she approached Sarah's front door. Before they could ring the doorbell, Sarah stepped out onto her porch, refusing to give them the home field advantage. "Can I help you?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Despite her racing heart, Victoria Blackwood, the woman announced, her smile not reaching her steel-grey eyes. CEO of Brightview Development Corporation, I believe we should talk about recent events. She gestured toward the demolished garage, as if it were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Recent events? Sarah's voice dripped with sarcasm. You mean the illegal destruction of my property and my classic cars? Victoria's smile remained fixed. May we come inside? This would be better discussed in private. No, Sarah replied firmly. Whatever you have to say, you can say it right here. She noticed several neighbors, including the Hendersons and Martha Wilson, had emerged from their homes, watching the scene unfold. Very well. Victoria's tone cooled noticeably. Ms. Mitchell, we're prepared to offer you full compensation for any inconvenience our construction team may have caused. Our legal department has drawn up a very generous settlement offer. One of her associates stepped forward, holding out a thick envelope. Sarah didn't move to take it. Inconvenience? You destroyed my garage without permission, crushed 3 classic cars, and now you're acting like this was some minor mistake? Mistakes were made, Victoria conceded, though her tone suggested otherwise. Our contractors were perhaps overzealous in implementing the approved community improvement plan. But let's be realistic, that garage was hardly in keeping with our vision for Brightview Valley's future. Your vision? Sarah felt her anger rising. This isn't Brightview Valley. This is Pine Valley Woods, and we're not part of your development plan. We never agreed to be. Victoria's practiced smile faltered slightly. Ms. Mitchell, progress is inevitable. This neighborhood has been selected for significant upgrades. The playground is just the beginning. We're talking about modern amenities, increased property values, a true community vision. A vision none of us asked for, Sarah countered. I found your real plans in the rubble, the ones showing high-rises and commercial developments. This isn't about a playground. It's about forcing people out of their homes. Something dangerous flashed in Victoria's eyes. Those documents are proprietary business information. If you've accessed them illegally, they were dropped on my property during the illegal demolition of my garage, Sarah interrupted, along with evidence of your unauthorized soil testing and suspicious dealings with city officials. Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice. Ms. Mitchell, you seem like an intelligent woman. Surely you understand that fighting progress only leads to unnecessary complications. The settlement offer in that envelope would allow you to purchase a new home in any of our premium developments, plus compensation for your vehicles. And if I refuse, then things become more difficult. Victoria's smile turned predatory. Legal battles are expensive and time-consuming. Ask yourself if protecting one outdated garage is worth potentially losing everything. We have resources you can't imagine, and we will pursue our development plans through every available channel. Sarah met Victoria's gaze steadily. I'm an architect, Ms. Blackwood. I understand development. What you're doing isn't progress. It's theft dressed up as improvement, and I will fight you every step of the way. Victoria stepped back, straightening her already immaculate jacket. That would be unwise. Many people have tried to stand in our way, Ms. Mitchell. Would you like to know where they are now? Living in apartments, their savings drained by legal fees, their properties seized through entirely legal means. Is that what you want? What I want, Sarah replied, her voice carrying across her front yard, where more neighbors had gathered, is for you to face charges for destroying my property. What I want is to expose how your company manipulates and bullies homeowners. What I want is justice. Victoria's mask of civility cracked completely. Justice? You haven't seen what we're capable of. This is your last chance to take the easy way out. After this, whatever happens is on your head. Sarah crossed her arms. Is that a threat, Ms. Blackwood? Because I'm recording this conversation, and I'm sure the police would be very interested in hearing it. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she noticed the phone partially hidden by Sarah's crossed arms. Without another word, she turned and walked back to her SUV, her associates hurrying to keep up. Before entering the vehicle, she paused and looked back. "You've made a serious mistake today, Miss Mitchell. I hope you're prepared for the consequences." With that, she disappeared behind the tinted glass, and the SUVs pulled away, leaving only a cloud of dust and an unspoken promise of retaliation. The gathered neighbors moved closer, offering words of support, but Sarah barely heard them. She was focused on Victoria's threat, not because it frightened her, but because it confirmed everything she'd suspected about Brightview development. This wasn't about community improvement, it was about power and control, and she'd just met the person wielding both. The surveillance began subtly. The day after Victoria Blackwood's visit, Sarah noticed a dark sedan parked at the end of her street. At first, she dismissed it as coincidence, but the car remained there for hours, its occupant occasionally visible taking photos with a long-lens camera. When Sarah tried to approach the vehicle, it smoothly pulled away, only to be replaced by a different car an hour later. The digital harassment started next. Her work email was flooded with spam from fake real estate agencies, all promoting exclusive opportunities in Brightview developments. Her phone began receiving calls from unlisted numbers. When answered, there was only silence before disconnecting. Her professional social media accounts were suddenly inundated with negative reviews from accounts created within the last 24 hours. "They're trying to pressure you professionally," David Martinez explained during their morning call. "Classic intimidation tactic, attack someone's livelihood to make them more susceptible to a buyout offer." Sarah had already noticed the impact. 2 potential clients had cancelled meetings, citing concerning reviews they'd seen online. Her architecture firm's rating had dropped significantly due to the flood of fake negative feedback. But Brightview's pressure campaign didn't stop there. While reviewing her security camera footage, Sarah noticed unusual activity during the night. Figures in dark clothing would appear at the edges of her property, placing small objects in her yard or taking photos. When she investigated in the morning, she'd find more of those electronic markers, or sometimes just disturbed earth where something had been removed. The Hendersons reported similar experiences. "Someone's been in our backyard at night," Mrs. Henderson confided, her usual cheerful demeanor strained. "They're leaving these strange notices about property compliance requirements and taking soil samples." George tried to confront them once, but they just disappeared into the darkness. The neighborhood's atmosphere changed. The once friendly streets became eerily quiet as residents grew wary of the constant surveillance. Children no longer played freely in their yards, and evening walks became tense affairs, with everyone watching for unmarked vehicles or suspicious figures. Sarah began documenting every incident meticulously. She installed additional security cameras and motion-activated lights around her property. Tom Garcia, putting his IT expertise to use, helped her set up a secure network to prevent any digital tampering with her surveillance system. "Look at this pattern," Tom pointed out one evening, reviewing the footage. "They're methodically mapping every property, probably looking for vulnerabilities. These aren't random intimidation tactics. They're gathering intelligence." The pressure took other forms too. Sarah's mail began arriving opened or damaged. Her garbage cans were mysteriously knocked over, their contents seemingly searched through. Small things disappeared from her yard: garden tools, outdoor furniture, even the no trespassing signs she'd posted. One morning, she found all 4. Tires on her daily driver car, flattened, each with a small, professional-looking cut in the sidewall. The message was clear. They could get to her any time they wanted. "You need to document everything," Martha advised, helping Sarah photograph the damaged tires. But be careful, they're trying to provoke you into doing something rash. That's probably why they're escalating the harassment. The surveillance wasn't limited to Sarah's property. Her movements around town were clearly being monitored. She'd spot the same faces in different locations, at her grocery store, near her office, at her regular coffee shop. Once, while meeting with her lawyer, she noticed a man with a telephoto lens, photographing them through the restaurant window. Even her online activities weren't safe. Her home internet connection began experiencing strange interruptions. Her personal emails showed signs of being accessed from unknown locations. Anonymous messages appeared in her inbox, containing details about her daily routine that only someone watching her could know. "They're trying to show you they're everywhere," David explained during a secure video call. "It's psychological warfare. They want you to feel helpless, isolated, and vulnerable, but Sarah refused to be intimidated. She began varying her routine unpredictably. She used secure communication apps recommended by Tom. She organized neighborhood watch groups to monitor and report suspicious activity. Every incident, no matter how small, was documented and added to her growing file of evidence against Brightview. The surveillance reached a new level when Sarah discovered a listening device hidden in her mailbox. It was sophisticated equipment, not something an amateur would have access to. When she showed it to a security expert recommended by her lawyer, his whistle of surprise confirmed her suspicions. "This is professional-grade surveillance tech," he explained, examining the device. "Whoever's watching you has serious resources at their disposal." Sarah noticed other changes too. Her neighbors reported being followed to work, receiving strange phone calls, finding their properties mysteriously inspected overnight. The entire neighborhood felt under siege, but instead of fracturing under the pressure, the community began to unite. They established a phone tree for reporting suspicious activity. Neighbors took turns patrolling the streets at night. Security cameras were synchronized to provide comprehensive coverage of the entire area. What Brightview intended as intimidation was instead fostering a stronger, more resilient community. Still, the constant surveillance took its toll. Sarah found herself checking over her shoulder, scrutinizing every unfamiliar face, second-guessing every interaction. The psychological pressure was exhausting, but she refused to show weakness. Each new surveillance attempt, each act of intimidation, only strengthened her resolve to expose Brightview's tactics and protect her neighborhood. As she reviewed the day's security footage that evening, a message arrived from an anonymous email address. It contained only one line. "Everyone has a breaking point, Ms. Mitchell. We'll find yours." Sarah saved the email with the rest of her evidence, her jaw set in determination. They might be watching her every move, but she was watching them too, and sooner or later they would make a mistake she could use against. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While documenting another night of suspicious activities around her property, Sarah received an email from an unfamiliar address, rcollins, brightviewarchive.com. The subject line read simply, "I can help." Initially cautious, Sarah almost deleted it as another Brightview intimidation tactic, but something about the email's tone seemed different. Opening it through a secure browser Tom had set up for her, she read, "Ms. Mitchell, my name is Rachel Collins. I was Brightview's chief legal counsel for 15 years, until I resigned 6 months ago. What they're doing to your neighborhood, I've seen it before. If you want to know the truth, meet me at the Carter Street Library tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come. Alone, but stay in public spaces. They're still watching me too." Sarah spent hours verifying Rachel Collins's identity. News articles confirmed she had indeed been Brightview's legal counsel, and her abrupt resignation had sparked speculation in development circles. More importantly, court records showed she had handled several cases similar to Sarah's situation, all of which had mysteriously settled out of court. The next day, Sarah took elaborate precautions before heading to the library. She had Martha Wilson follow the car that had been surveilling a house, creating a diversion. Tom Garcia helped her check for tracking devices on her vehicle, and she took a deliberately circuitous route, watching for tails. The library was quiet when she arrived, with only a few patrons scattered among the rows of books. In the reference section, she found an elegant woman in her 60s, her silver hair cut in a sharp bob, reading what appeared to be old property records. "The playground is always their first move," Rachel said without looking up as Sarah approached. "It's harder for people to oppose something for the children. Makes the residents look selfish if they fight it." Sarah sat down across from her. "Why did you reach out to me?" Rachel finally looked up, her green eyes sharp and alert. "Because you're the first person who's gathered enough evidence to actually hurt them. Those documents you found in the rubble. The soil sensors. Victoria's threatening visit. You're building a case that could expose their entire operation." She pulled out a leather portfolio and placed it on the table. "But what you don't know is that this goes much deeper than one neighborhood. Brightview has been perfecting this technique for years. They target independent communities, manufacture HOA authority, and use intimidation to force buyouts. Then they flip the properties for massive developments." Opening the portfolio, Rachel revealed dozens of documents, internal memos, strategic plans and email chains that outlined Brightview's systematic approach to acquiring properties. "They call it community transformation," Rachel explained, her voice bitter. "I helped create the legal framework for it, finding loopholes in property laws, drafting deliberately confusing HOA documents. I told myself it was just business, just progress. But then I saw what it did to people, families losing homes they'd lived in for generations, entire communities destroyed." Sarah studied the documents, her architect's eye noting the patterns. "These development plans, they're all identical, different neighborhoods, but the same basic strategy." Rachel nodded. "They have a template. First, they create fake HOA documentation and start making impossible demands. Then come the fines, the harassment, the property damage, all designed to make staying more expensive than selling. The playground in your neighborhood, Phase 1. Phase 2 would have been a community center requiring more demolitions. By Phase 3, most residents usually give up and sell." "But why did you quit?" Sarah asked, watching Rachel's expression carefully. Rachel's face darkened. 6 months ago, they crossed a line. A homeowner in Riverside Heights, a retired teacher named Eleanor James, refused to sell. She had evidence of their tactics like you. Then there was a mysterious fire in her home. She survived, but barely. All her documentation was destroyed. Rachel's hands trembled slightly. "That's when I knew I couldn't be part of it anymore." "Do you have proof?" Sarah asked quietly. "Not of the fire, they're too careful for that. But I have something better." Rachel pulled out a USB drive. "Every template they use, every legal document, every strategy memo, it's all here, including evidence of bribes to city officials and falsified permits. I've been gathering it for years, knowing someday someone would need it." Sarah stared at the small drive. "Why didn't you expose them yourself?" "My resignation agreement included an ironclad non-disclosure clause. If I went public, they'd destroy me legally. But you..." Rachel smiled slightly. "You're already fighting them. You have standing as an injured party. With your evidence and my inside knowledge, we might actually have a chance to stop them." She slid the drive across the table. "But be careful. Victoria Blackwood didn't get where she is by playing fair. When she realizes I'm helping you..." Rachel left the threat unspoken. "Why risk it then?" Sarah asked, pocketing the drive. "Because someone has to stop them. What they're doing, it's not just about property rights anymore. They're destroying communities, erasing history, forcing people out of their homes through fear and manipulation. I helped build this system. I need to help tear it down." Rachel stood, gathering her things. I'll send you secure contact information. Don't trust regular email or phone calls. They monitor everything. And Sarah. She paused, her expression grave. Watch your back. Now that you have this information, they'll do anything to discredit or stop you. As Rachel walked away, Sarah remained at the table, processing everything she'd learned. The USB drive felt heavy in her pocket, a weight of responsibility as much as evidence. She had hoped to save her garage and her neighborhood. Now she realized she was part of something much bigger, a chance to expose and stop a systemic abuse of power that threatened communities everywhere. Checking carefully for surveillance, Sarah left the library, her mind already racing with plans. With Rachel's evidence and her own documentation, they had a real chance to fight back. But first, she needed to ensure the information stayed safe, because now she knew exactly what Brightview was capable of and what they would do to keep their secrets hidden. Back in her home office, Sarah connected the USB drive to a secure laptop Tom had set up for her, one without internet access to prevent any potential tracking or data theft. As she began exploring the files Rachel had provided, the true scope of Brightview's operation left her stunned. The drive contained thousands of documents, meticulously organized by neighborhood and date. Each folder revealed a similar pattern, but seeing it laid out systematically made it all the more chilling. Pine Valley Woods wasn't their first target. It was merely the latest in a long string of community takeovers. "This is incredible," Martha Wilson breathed, looking over Sarah's shoulder at the screen. The retired judge had come over to help analyze the legal documents. "Look at these internal memos. They actually have a scoring system for targeting neighborhoods." Sarah pulled up the document Martha indicated. The spreadsheet listed criteria for optimal acquisition targets: neighborhoods without existing HOAs, high percentage of long-term residents, unique architectural features, and proximity to planned commercial developments. Pine Valley Woods had scored perfectly on their assessment. They've been planning this for years, Sarah realized, opening another folder. These geological surveys of our neighborhood, they're dated 3 years ago. They were studying us long before anyone knew they existed. The documents revealed a sophisticated operation. Brightview didn't just target neighborhoods, they systematically dismantled them. First came the surveillance phase, gathering detailed information about each resident, work schedules, financial situations, property maintenance habits. Then they began manufacturing problems that only they could solve. "Look at this playbook," Martha pointed to another document. They call it Community Conversion Strategy. Step 1. Create artificial authority through false HOA documentation. Step 2. Generate compliance issues through impossible standards. Step 3. Escalate enforcement through financial pressure and property alterations. Sarah's garage demolition wasn't a mistake. It was textbook Brightview tactics. The documents showed similar demonstration projects in other neighborhoods, always targeting respected community members who might rally opposition. "They're not just bullies," Sarah muttered. "They're predators. They study their targets, learn their weaknesses, and strike where it hurts most." The financial documents were equally revealing. Brightview operated through a maze of shell companies and holding corporations. They would purchase a few key properties in target neighborhoods through different entities, establishing multiple footholds before revealing their true intentions. "Here's something interesting," Martha said, pointing to a series of emails. "They have plants in city governments, people on their payroll who help fast-track permits and override zoning restrictions. That's how they got the demolition equipment to your property without raising red flags." The evidence was damning, but it was a section labeled Community Response Protocols that truly revealed Brightview's ruthlessness. The document detailed strategies for handling resistance, character assassination campaigns, strategic property damage, manipulation of utility services, and even manufactured code violations. They have a whole department dedicated to breaking. People's will to fight, Sarah said, her voice tight with anger. Listen to this. Resistance cases require sustained pressure across multiple fronts. Financial strain combined with personal harassment has proven most effective in achieving voluntary compliance. As they dug deeper, they found documentation of Brightview's ultimate plans for Pine Valley Woods. The playground was just phase 1 of a 5-stage development project. The final plans showed a massive mixed-use development, high-rise apartments, retail spaces, and office buildings. Every existing home would be demolished. The property values they're promising people are lies, Martha noted, examining the financial projections. Once they get control of enough properties, they'll force out the remaining holdouts through eminent domain claims. They've done it before. Look at what happened in Riverside Heights. Sarah pulled up the Riverside Heights files, reading about the mysterious fire Rachel had mentioned. The official reports claimed electrical failure, but internal emails told a different story. They had deliberately targeted Eleanor James, the retired teacher, because she had been gathering evidence against them. This isn't just about our neighborhood anymore, Sarah realized. They're doing this across the entire region. Each successful takeover gives them more resources, more influence, more power to target the next community. The documents showed Brightview had already acquired properties in 12 other neighborhoods, all at various stages of their conversion process. Pine Valley Woods was just one piece of a massive redevelopment plan that would reshape the entire area. We need to stop them, Martha said firmly, not just here, but everywhere. These documents prove they're operating a systematic fraud scheme. Sarah nodded, but something in another folder caught her eye. Opening it revealed profiles of key Brightview executives, including Victoria Blackwood. The CEO's background was even more interesting than Sarah had expected. Look at this. Blackwood has a history of similar operations in other states. She's been sued multiple times, but always manages to settle out of court. The complaints disappear and the developments proceed. The truth was now clear. They weren't just fighting one development project or trying to save one neighborhood. They were up against a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had been perfecting its tactics for years. The question was, how could they stop an organization with such deep pockets and political connections? As if in answer, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Now you know what we're dealing with. Ready to take them down? Sarah looked at Martha, who nodded grimly. The retired judge's expression was determined. We have the evidence, Martha said. Now we need to use it. Sarah began copying the files to secure drives. With this information, they could fight back. But first, they needed to protect themselves, because now they knew exactly what Brightview was capable of. And the stakes had just gotten much higher. David Martinez's law office buzzed with unusual activity for a Saturday morning. Sarah had assembled a team of experts, each carefully vetted by Rachel Collins, to analyze different aspects of the Brightview evidence. The conference room had been transformed into a war room, with documents covering every available surface, and multiple laptops displaying various analyses. The pattern of fraud is clear, announced Elena Rodriguez, a forensic accountant who had previously worked on corporate corruption cases. She gestured to a complex financial flowchart projected on the wall. Brightview isn't just creating fake HOAs. They're running a sophisticated money laundering operation through their development projects. Sarah watched as Elena traced the flow of funds through various shell companies. They use the threat of HOA fines to pressure homeowners, then funnel the collected money through these dummy corporations. It's brilliant but illegal. The property acquisitions are just one part of a larger financial scheme. David nodded, making notes. This helps establish RICO predicates. We're not just looking at property fraud. We're talking about a criminal enterprise operating across state lines. On the other side of the room, James Chen, a cybersecurity expert recommended by Tom Garcia, was analyzing the digital evidence. Their surveillance operation is extensive, he reported, pointing to his screen, but they got sloppy. Those electronic markers they planted in your neighborhood, they're leaving digital fingerprints we can trace. Sarah had also brought in Marcus Wright, a former urban planning commissioner who had once refused a position with Brightview. Their development plans violate numerous zoning laws, he explained, examining the blueprints found in Sarah's garage. Rubble. These high-rise proposals, they're physically impossible without major infrastructure changes that haven't been approved. They're selling investors on projects they can't legally build. The team worked methodically, building a comprehensive case against Brightview. Rachel Collins joined them via secure video link, providing crucial context about the company's internal operations. "We need to move carefully," Rachel warned. Victoria. "Blackwood has judges in her pocket. She's skilled at making legal problems disappear. We need to make this case so airtight that no amount of influence can dismiss it," David agreed, organizing the evidence into categories. "We'll file multiple actions simultaneously: criminal complaints, civil RICO charges, and class action suits on behalf of affected homeowners. Hit them from every angle so they can't focus their resources on a single defense." Sarah watched the experts work, feeling a surge of hope. Each person brought unique skills and insights to the fight. Elena's financial expertise revealed the money trail. James's technical knowledge exposed their surveillance methods. Marcus understood the development fraud. Together, they were uncovering layers of corruption that went far beyond simple property disputes. "There's something else," Rachel added, her voice grave through the secure line. "I've been contacted by former Brightview employees willing to testify, people who were involved in similar operations in other states. They've been waiting for a chance to come forward. The implications were enormous. With whistleblower testimony, they could expose not just the current schemes, but years of systematic fraud." David immediately began preparing witness protection. "Requests, we need to move fast," he advised. "Once Brightview realizes we're building a case like this, they'll try to silence these witnesses. We need to get their testimonies recorded and secured before that happens." The team worked through the day, breaking only for brief meals ordered in. Sarah marveled at the professionalism and dedication of each expert. They weren't just helping her save her neighborhood. They were committed to exposing and stopping a criminal enterprise that had hurt countless communities. By evening, they had assembled a preliminary legal strategy. David outlined the plan. "First, we file for an emergency injunction to stop all Brightview activities in Pine Valley Woods. That gives us breathing room. Then we file the federal complaints: RICO charges, wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy. The civil suits come next, with class action status to represent all affected homeowners." Eleanor added, "We'll also submit our financial analysis to the SEC and FBI. The money laundering aspects will get their attention. Once federal investigators start looking at their books, Brightview's whole house of cards could collapse." James had set up secure communications for the team and established protocols for protecting their evidence. "Everything's encrypted and backed up to multiple secure locations. If they try to hack us or destroy evidence, we have redundancies in place." Marcus provided crucial context about development regulations. "I've identified at least 30 clear violations in their current projects. Each one carries significant penalties. More importantly, these violations could void their existing permits and contracts." As the meeting wound down, David gathered everyone's attention. "What we're doing here isn't just about one neighborhood or one company. We're taking on a system of corruption that's been destroying communities for years. It won't be easy and it won't be quick, but together we have a real chance to stop them." Sarah looked around the room at her team of experts, professionals who had put aside their weekend to fight for justice. Each brought unique skills and perspectives, but all shared a common goal: exposing the truth and holding Brightview accountable. "Thank you all," she said simply. "I started this fighting for my garage and my neighborhood, but you've helped me see the bigger picture. We're fighting for every community they've targeted, every home they've threatened, every person they've tried to bully into submission." Rachel's voice came through the speaker, firm and determined. "And this time, we're going to win." As the experts gathered their materials and prepared to leave, Sarah felt a newfound confidence. With this team behind her, Brightview's days of unchecked corruption were numbered. The real fight was about to begin, with Brightview's true nature exposed. Sarah and her team implemented comprehensive security measures to protect themselves and their evidence. The morning after the strategy meeting, Sarah's property transformed into a digital fortress under James Chen's expertise. "We're installing military-grade security cameras with night vision and motion detection," James explained, mounting a sophisticated camera system. "They'll automatically upload encrypted footage to secure cloud servers. Even if Brightview's people try to disable or destroy the cameras, we'll have backup footage." Tom Garcia had taken a week off work to help fortify their digital defenses. Together with James, they created a sophisticated mesh network throughout the neighborhood, connecting all the security systems through encrypted channels. If they try to cut one connection, the network automatically reroutes through backup paths, Tom explained, showing Sarah the network diagram. The physical security was equally thorough. Marcus Wright brought in trusted contractors who specialized in security installations. They reinforced doors and windows, installed impact-resistant glass, and set up a comprehensive alarm system that would alert not just local police, but also their entire legal team. "We're not just securing your property," Marcus said, reviewing the installation plans. "We're creating a documented trail of every attempt they make to intimidate or harass you." Sarah's neighbors joined the security initiative. The Hendersons installed cameras covering their shared property line. Martha Wilson's background as a judge helped expedite permits for security fencing. Even the local police department increased patrols in the area after David Martinez presented them with evidence of Brightview's previous illegal activities. Elena Rodriguez helped Sarah protect her financial assets. "They'll try to drain your resources through legal fees and fraudulent fines," Elena warned. "We need to secure your accounts and document every transaction." They set up separate accounts for legal expenses, with careful monitoring for any suspicious activity. The team also implemented personal security measures. Sarah began varying her daily routines unpredictably. She installed tracking devices in her vehicles and carried a personal alarm. Rachel Collins had warned them that Brightview might escalate their intimidation tactics once they realized the extent of the evidence against them. "Document everything," David insisted during their daily security briefing. "Every suspicious car, every unusual incident, every attempted contact. We're building a pattern of harassment that will strengthen our case." The neighborhood itself became a web of surveillance and counter-surveillance. Residents organized watch schedules, monitoring for Brightview's observers while documenting their activities. Any unknown vehicle or suspicious person was immediately photographed and logged. James set up a secure communication system for the neighborhood. "Each resident has a panic button app on their phone," he demonstrated. "One press sends an alert to everyone in the network, including GPS coordinates and audio recording. The protection extended to their digital lives as well." Sarah's work computer was completely isolated from the internet, accessible only through a secure, encrypted connection. All communication about the case took place through encrypted messaging apps on hardened devices provided by James. "They're already trying to hack our systems," Tom reported one evening, showing Sarah the firewall logs. "But we've got honeypot servers set up. Every attempt they make gives us more evidence of their illegal activities." The team also prepared for legal attacks. David had filed preemptive motions protecting their evidence and witnesses. "They'll try to discredit us, claim the documents are fabricated," he explained. "We've had everything authenticated by independent experts and stored with trusted third parties." Rachel's insider knowledge proved invaluable in anticipating Brightview's moves. "They'll try to divide the neighborhood," she warned during a secure video call. "Offer deals to some residents, spread rumors about others. We need to maintain unity." Sarah organized weekly neighborhood meetings in secure locations, keeping everyone informed and coordinated. The community's resolve strengthened as they understood the full scope of what they were fighting against. Physical security was enhanced with subtle but effective measures. Motion-activated lights were installed throughout the neighborhood. Landscaping was modified to eliminate potential hiding spots. Security consultants trained residents in surveillance awareness and personal safety. "We're not just playing defense," Sarah reminded her team during an evening briefing. "Every security measure, every documented incident, every fail despite all their security measures, Sarah knew they still needed more concrete evidence of Brightview's current operations. Late one night, after detecting unusual activity on their security network, she made a risky decision. A group of Brightview's agents had been observed entering one of their local offices after hours, carrying boxes of documents. "This could be our chance," she told David Martinez over their secure line. "They might be moving or destroying evidence. We need to know what's in those files." David hesitated. "Sarah, it's too dangerous. If they catch you—" "They won't," she assured him. "James and Tom have already hacked their security system. We know their patrol patterns, their camera blind spots. And Martha got us a warrant based on Rachel's testimony about document destruction." The plan was risky but methodical. Using James's technical expertise, they had mapped out every security camera and motion sensor in Brightview's local office. Tom had created a loop in their surveillance footage, giving Sarah a 15-minute window to access their records room. Dressed in black and equipped with a small camera and portable scanner, Sarah approached the building through a service entrance. James's voice guided her through an earpiece, directing her around security patrols. The warrant was legitimate, but they knew Brightview's security wouldn't honor it. They'd destroy evidence first and deal with legal consequences later. "Security guard approaching from the north corridor," James warned. "Duck into the supply closet on your left." Sarah slipped inside just as a guard passed by, his flashlight beam sweeping the hallway. Her heart pounded, but years of precision. Work as an architect had taught her to keep her hands steady. Once the guard passed, she continued toward the records room. The door required a keycard, but Tom had cloned one using data captured from their surveillance. "Remember," his voice crackled in her ear, "you have 12 minutes before the next patrol." Inside the records room, Sarah worked quickly, scanning documents with practiced efficiency. The files revealed exactly what they'd suspected: detailed plans for strong-arming other neighborhoods, lists of paid officials, and records of fraudulent property transfers. "Sarah, movement on the second floor," James warned. "They're doing an unscheduled patrol." She kept scanning, knowing each document could be crucial. Then she found something unexpected: a folder marked Project Legacy, containing plans for not just Pine Valley Woods, but the entire county. Brightview's scheme was larger than anyone had imagined. 2 minutes, Tom urged. "You need to get out now." Sarah quickly scanned the legacy documents and was about to leave when she spotted another folder, this one labeled Incident Reports. Inside were detailed accounts of their intimidation tactics, including the fire at Eleanor James's house. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. "Sarah, get out!" James hissed in her ear. She grabbed the incident reports and slipped out through a back exit just as voices approached the records room. Heart racing, she made her way through the building's blind spots, following the escape route they'd planned. But Brightview's security was more alert than usual. As she neared the final exit, a guard appeared at the end of the hallway. "Hey, stop right there!" Sarah ran, her soft-soled shoes silent on the polished floor. The guard's radio crackled as he called for backup. She could hear multiple footsteps now, converging on her location. "Third window on the left," James directed. "The security sensor is looped. Go now." She slipped through the window onto a narrow ledge, grateful for her rock-climbing experience. Below, flashlight beams crisscrossed the darkness as more guards joined the search. Moving carefully along the ledge, Sarah reached the fire escape they'd identified as her emergency exit. The metal creaked softly as she descended, every sound seeming impossibly loud in the quiet night. "Security vehicle approaching from the south," Tom warned. "Wait for my signal." Sarah froze on the fire escape, pressing herself against the wall, as a patrol car cruised past below. Once it turned the corner, she quickly made her way down and sprinted to where Martha waited in a car with tinted windows. "Did you get it?" Martha asked as they drove away, taking an elaborate route to avoid being followed. Sarah patted her bag, containing the scanner and its precious data. "More than we expected. The project legacy files alone will blow this whole thing wide open." Back at their secure location, the team began analyzing the documents. The legacy files revealed Brightview's ultimate plan, a massive redevelopment scheme that would displace thousands of residents across multiple counties. "This isn't just about property development anymore," Sarah realized, reviewing the files. "They're trying to reshape entire communities, erase neighborhoods, and replace them with their corporate vision. And they're working with officials at every level to make it happen." The incident reports were equally damning, providing detailed documentation of their intimidation tactics, including discussions of the fire at Eleanor James's house. It was the evidence they needed to prove Brightview's criminal methods. "This was incredibly dangerous," David admonished, but his eyes showed his approval as he reviewed the documents. But these files could be the key to stopping them. Sarah knew he was right about the danger. If she'd been caught, Brightview would have pressed charges, discrediting their entire case. But sometimes she realized you had to take risks to expose the truth. The evidence she'd gathered could help not just her neighborhood, but countless communities threatened by Brightview's schemes. As the team worked through the night, analyzing and documenting their new evidence, Sarah felt a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. The risk had been worth it. Now they had proof not just of what Brightview had done, but what they were planning to do. The question was, could they stop them before it was too late? Victoria Blackwood's response to Sarah's investigation came swiftly and brutally. The morning after Sarah's covert operation, a thick manila envelope arrived at her door by courier. Inside were photos, dozens of them, showing Sarah entering Brightview's offices, along with screenshots from security cameras. A handwritten note on expensive stationery read, "Did you really think we wouldn't notice? You have 24 hours to surrender all evidence and withdraw any legal claims, or these photos go to the police. Breaking and entering is a felony, Ms. Mitchell. Your choice." Sarah immediately called David Martinez. "They're trying to trap us," he said after reviewing the threat, "but they don't know we had a warrant. They just exposed themselves to criminal charges for attempted blackmail." Before they could respond, Brightview launched a coordinated attack. Local news outlets received anonymous tips about Sarah's criminal history, fabricated stories about professional misconduct and fraud. Her architecture firm received complaints from non-existent clients. Building inspectors suddenly appeared at her ongoing projects, citing suspicious violations. "They're trying to destroy your professional reputation," Eleanor warned during an emergency team meeting. "But look at this. They're using the same shell companies we identified in our investigation to fund the smear campaign. They're getting sloppy." The pressure intensified throughout the day. Sarah's clients began receiving calls suggesting she was under federal investigation. Her professional licenses were suddenly under review due to anonymous complaints. Even her bank notified her of possible account freezes due to suspicious activities. Victoria Blackwood made a personal appearance that afternoon, arriving in a black SUV with a team of lawyers. "You've forced my hand, Miss Mitchell," she announced, standing on Sarah's porch. "We're filing criminal charges for corporate espionage and theft of proprietary information. Your career is over unless you cooperate." Sarah met her gaze steadily. "Interesting timing, Victoria. Especially since we have proof you knew about the warrant. Interfering with a legal search? That's obstruction of justice." Victoria's composed facade cracked slightly. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. This goes beyond your little neighborhood dispute. We have interests to protect, commitments to honor. The project will proceed." "The project?" Sarah laughed coldly. "You mean Project Legacy? Your plan to demolish half the county for your corporate donors?" "Yes, we know all about that too." The color drained from Victoria's face. "Where did you—" "Those files were secure." "Nothing secure when you're breaking the law," Sarah replied. "We have everything. The bribes, the intimidation tactics, the fake HOAs, even the Eleanor James fire. Did you think that would stay buried forever?" Victoria's response was chilling. "Accidents happen, Ms. Mitchell. Homes burn, cars crash, people disappear. Choose carefully which accident you prefer. Is that a threat, Ms. Blackwood? Because we're recording this conversation, and I'm sure the FBI would be very interested in hearing it." Victoria's lawyers quickly pulled her away, but the message was clear. This wasn't just business anymore. It was personal. Inside, Sarah's team was already responding to Brightview's attacks. James Chen traced the smear campaign to specific Brightview employees. Elena documented the financial transactions behind the false complaints. David prepared countersuits for defamation and harassment. "They're desperate," Rachel observed via secure video call. "Victoria never gets personally involved unless she's losing control. But be careful. She's most dangerous when cornered." The threat against Sarah's life wasn't idle. By evening, suspicious vehicles were openly following her. Strange men appeared outside her house, taking photos. Her phone was flooded with calls from blocked numbers, each playing recordings of her private conversations. "They're trying to show you they can reach you anywhere," Martha warned, "but they've just given us more evidence of criminal harassment." Sarah refused to back down. Instead, she called a press conference for the next morning. "If they want to play hardball," she told her team, "let's show them what real exposure looks like. It's time everyone knew exactly what Brightview Development has been doing to our communities." Victoria's final message came just before midnight, a simple text from an unknown number. "Last chance, Ms. Mitchell. Some stories don't have happy endings." Sarah's response was equally brief. "You're right. Yours won't." The battle lines were drawn. Brightview had shown their true colors, escalating from corporate bullying to outright threats. But in doing so, they'd given Sarah and her team exactly what they needed: proof of their criminal methods and the desperation behind their polished corporate facade. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin, and Sarah was ready. Brightview thought they could threaten her into silence. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The city council chambers were packed to capacity for the emergency public hearing. Sarah stood at the podium, facing not just the council members, but a row of television cameras and dozens of reporters. Her presentation had been meticulously prepared, with Rachel's evidence organized for maximum impact. "What I'm about to show you isn't just about one demolished garage or one neighborhood," Sarah began, her voice steady. "This is about a systematic campaign to destroy communities across our region." She gestured to the large screen behind her. Where James Chen began displaying their evidence, the presentation was devastating. Internal Brightview documents showed their predatory tactics: Financial records revealed bribes to officials. Maps displayed their true development plans, not just for Pine Valley Woods, but for entire districts. Security footage showed their intimidation teams in action. Brightview Development isn't building playgrounds, Sarah continued. They're destroying homes, erasing communities, and using illegal tactics to force people out of their neighborhoods. She played the recording of Victoria Blackwood's threats, watching council members' faces pale at the CEO's words. From the audience, homeowners from other targeted neighborhoods began standing up, sharing their stories. Eleanor James, the retired teacher whose house had mysteriously burned, testified via video link from her hospital room. Former Brightview employees, encouraged by Rachel's example, came forward with their own evidence. Victoria Blackwood sat in the front row, her usual composure cracking as the evidence mounted. When she tried to interrupt, Martha Wilson, speaking as a former judge, shut her down. "Ms. Blackwood, you'll have your chance to respond to these criminal allegations, probably in court." The media presence ensured everything was broadcast. Live. Social media exploded with clips from the hearing. Brightview crimes started trending as more victims shared their stories online. James and Tom had created a secure website where people could submit evidence of Brightview's activities, and submissions were pouring in. Sarah presented the project legacy documents last, revealing Brightview's ultimate plan. "They're not just targeting individual neighborhoods," she explained, displaying their master development map. "They're trying to remake our entire region, replacing communities with corporate developments, using illegal tactics and fraudulent HOAs to force people out." The council members, many of whom had initially seemed skeptical, were now fully engaged. Some were openly taking notes, others whispering urgently to their staff. Several looked distinctly uncomfortable as their own names appeared in Brightview's documents. Elena Rodriguez presented the financial evidence, methodically exposing Brightview's money laundering operations. David Martinez outlined the legal violations, from fraud to racketeering. Marcus Wright demonstrated how their development plans violated countless zoning laws and environmental regulations. "This isn't development," Sarah concluded. "It's organized crime hiding behind corporate paperwork and fake community improvement projects. They destroyed my garage as a warning to others. But today, we're sending our own message. We will not be intimidated, we will not be bought out, and we will not let them destroy our communities." The public response was immediate and overwhelming. Other neighborhoods reported similar Brightview tactics. Journalists began investigating connections between Brightview and local officials. State regulators announced immediate investigations into their development permits. Victoria Blackwood attempted damage control, approaching the podium with practiced corporate smoothness. But faced with documented evidence of their crimes, her usual tactics fell flat. When questioned about specific incidents, she could only offer corporate doublespeak about community improvement initiatives and urban renewal projects. The hearing lasted hours, but its impact was seismic. By evening, Brightview's stock was plummeting. Their investors were demanding answers. Federal investigators had opened multiple inquiries. The carefully constructed facade of corporate legitimacy was crumbling under the weight of public exposure. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "You did it. They can't hide anymore. This is just the beginning." Looking out at the crowded chamber, seeing the mix of media, angry residents, and shocked officials, Sarah knew Rachel was right. By taking their fight public, they'd changed the game. Brightview could threaten individuals, but they couldn't silence an entire community demanding justice. The battle wasn't over. Victoria Blackwood's glare promised retaliation, but the balance of power had shifted. The truth was out, and no amount of corporate money or legal maneuvering could put it back in the shadows. The final confrontation with Victoria Blackwood came 3 days after the public hearing. Sarah was reviewing security footage in her home office when her system detected multiple vehicles entering the neighborhood. 3 black SUVs pulled up to her house, and Victoria emerged, flanked by security guards rather than lawyers this time. Sarah activated the emergency protocol James had designed, alerting her team and starting all cameras recording. She met Victoria on the porch, protected by bulletproof glass doors James had installed. "You've cost us billions in market value," Victoria snarled, her corporate mask completely gone. "Our investors are pulling out. Federal agents are raiding our offices. You think you've won, but you have no idea what I'm capable of." "Actually, I do," Sarah replied calmly. "That's why this conversation is being broadcast live to every news station in the state." She gestured to the hidden cameras. "Your threats don't work anymore, Victoria. Everyone can see you for what you are." Victoria's face contorted with rage. "You think exposing us changes anything? We own half the judges in this circuit. Our political connections go all the way to the governor's office. One phone call and your evidence disappears, your witnesses recant, and you—" She stepped closer, voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Have a tragic accident." Sarah smiled coldly. "Check your phone, Victoria." Victoria's phone buzzed with incoming messages. Her face paled as she read them. Federal indictments had just been issued for Brightview's entire executive team. Their accounts were frozen, their assets seized. The governor's office had just announced a special investigation into corruption related to Brightview's projects. "You're done," Sarah stated firmly. "The FBI has your internal servers. Rachel gave them everything, every bribe, every threat, every crime. Your political connections are running scared. Your investors are cooperating with prosecutors, and your employees are turning state's evidence." Victoria lunged forward, but Sarah's security system activated instantly. Lights flooded the property as police vehicles emerged from hidden positions. Martha Wilson stepped out of Sarah's house, accompanied by federal agents. "Victoria Blackwood," Martha announced, her judicial authority evident in her voice. "You're under arrest for multiple federal violations, including racketeering, mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder." As agents moved to handcuff her, Victoria's composure shattered completely. "You can't do this. Do you know who I am? I built this company. I own this town." "Not anymore," Sarah replied. "You tried to destroy our communities. Instead, you destroyed yourself." The other SUVs attempted to flee, but were blocked by police vehicles. Victoria's security team, faced with federal agents, surrendered without resistance. News helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting the scene live. Sarah watched as Victoria was led away in handcuffs, still shouting threats and promises of revenge. Her phone buzzed with messages from neighbors, other communities, and her legal team. Brightview's reign of terror was ending in full public view. David Martinez arrived moments later, grinning. "Federal prosecutors are moving fast. They're using RICO statutes. Victoria's looking at decades in prison, and that's just the beginning. The evidence from your garage demolition broke the whole thing open." The neighborhood erupted in celebration. As news spread, residents emerged from their homes, gathering in the street. The fear that had gripped them for months finally lifted. They had stood together, fought back, and won. Rachel Collins joined via video call, tears in her eyes. "We did it, Sarah. Brightview's finished. Their entire criminal enterprise is exposed. Communities across the state are safe from them now." Sarah looked at her demolished garage, now a symbol of resistance rather than victimization. Victoria's arrest marked the end of Brightview's power, but more importantly, it proved that communities could stand up to corporate bullies and win. As federal agents continued gathering evidence from Brightview's vehicles, Sarah addressed her gathered neighbors. "This isn't just our victory. It's a victory for every community they threatened, every home they tried to steal, every person they tried to intimidate. We stood together, and we won together." The media descended, eager for interviews, but Sarah let Martha and David handle them. Her thoughts were already turning to the future, rebuilding her garage, helping other communities recover from Brightview's damage, and ensuring nothing like this could happen again. The first major legal victory came swiftly. Judge Harrison, of the Federal District Court, issued a sweeping preliminary injunction against Brightview Development Corporation. Sarah sat in the courtroom as the judge read his decision, her team beside her. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, Judge Harrison declared, this court finds that Brightview Development has engaged in a pattern of fraudulent activities that pose an immediate threat to public welfare. The court hereby freezes all Brightview assets, halts all current development projects, and prohibits any further property acquisitions or demolitions. The judge's order was comprehensive. Every Brightview project across the state was immediately suspended. Their bank accounts were frozen. Their equipment was seized. Most importantly, all their fraudulent HOA claims were invalidated. David Martinez couldn't contain his smile. "This is unprecedented," he whispered to Sarah. "The judge basically gave us everything we asked for and more. They can't touch any property anywhere in the state now." The impact was immediate and far-reaching. Construction crews at Brightview, sites packed up and left. Their local offices were sealed by federal marshals. The company's stock, already battered by Victoria's arrest, plunged to record lows. Elena Rodriguez's financial analysis had been crucial. "Look at this," she showed. Sarah, during the recess, pointing to her laptop screen. The asset freeze caught them mid-transaction. "We can now trace every penny they tried to hide. Their whole financial network is exposed." The victory extended beyond just stopping Brightview. Judge Harrison ordered the creation of a victim compensation fund using seized Brightview assets. Communities they had targeted would receive restitution. Homeowners they had forced out could reclaim their properties. Rachel Collins joined the celebration via secure video. "This is more than we hoped for," she said, her voice emotional. The judge didn't just stop them, he created a framework for undoing all the damage they've done. Back in Pine Valley Woods, the impact was immediate. The fraudulent HOA notices stopped. The surveillance cars disappeared. The intimidation tactics ceased. For the first time in months, the neighborhood felt peaceful again. Martha Wilson, reviewing the judge's order, highlighted its broader implications. "This creates a legal precedent," she explained to the gathered neighbors. "Other companies trying similar tactics can now be stopped using this ruling. It's not just about Brightview anymore." Sarah's garage site, still untouched since the demolition, became a symbol of the victory. The judge specifically ordered Brightview to pay for its reconstruction, including full restoration of her classic cars or compensation for their value. But the most satisfying part came when the judge addressed Victoria Blackwood's tactics directly. "The court finds Ms. Blackwood's attempts to threaten and intimidate witnesses particularly egregious," he stated. "These actions will be referred to federal prosecutors for additional criminal charges." The preliminary injunction was just the beginning. David explained that the full trial would follow, but this initial victory gave them everything they needed to protect their community while the case proceeded. "We've won the first battle," Sarah told her neighbors that evening. "Brightview can't hurt anyone else while we finish dismantling their entire operation." The media coverage was extensive. Other communities contacted them, sharing similar stories and seeking advice. Sarah's team began helping other neighborhoods fight back against corporate developers using similar tactics. As she stood in front of her property that evening, watching federal agents catalog evidence from the demolition site, Sarah felt a profound sense of validation. The legal victory wasn't just about stopping one company, it was about proving that communities could stand up to corporate bullies and win. Tom Garcia, monitoring Brightview's digital networks, reported that their entire communication system was in chaos. "They never expected to lose like this," he said. They had no contingency plan for total shutdown. The injunction marked a turning point. Brightview's power was broken, their tactics exposed, their operations frozen. But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The real work of rebuilding and ensuring such abuse could never happen again was still ahead. The ripple effects of their victory spread rapidly. Within days of the injunction, Sarah's phone didn't stop ringing with calls from other communities facing similar battles. Pine Valley Woods became a blueprint for resistance against corporate developers attempting hostile takeovers. "Your neighborhood is teaching others how to fight back," Rachel said during their daily update. "Communities in 3 neighboring states have already used our evidence to stop similar schemes. They're calling it the Pine Valley Protocol." Sarah's team expanded to meet the growing demand. David Martinez brought in additional lawyers to handle cases across the region. Elena Rodriguez trained local accountants to spot financial fraud patterns. James Chen developed a secure platform for communities to share evidence and strategies. Martha Wilson organized a coalition of neighborhood associations, creating a network that could quickly identify and respond to corporate takeover attempts. "We're not just defending our homes anymore," she explained during their first meeting. "We're changing how development happens in this entire region." The movement gained powerful allies. State legislators, seeing the public support, proposed new laws strengthening homeowner protections. Environmental groups joined the fight, using Brightview's exposed documents to challenge other questionable developments. Civil rights organizations highlighted how corporate takeovers disproportionately targeted minority communities. Tom Garcia's secure communication network expanded to connect hundreds of neighborhoods. "Every community that joins makes the network stronger," he explained, showing Sarah the growing map of connected communities. "We can now spot patterns of corporate misconduct before they can fully implement their schemes." Media coverage shifted from just reporting on Brightview's crimes to investigating similar operations nationwide. Sarah's story became a catalyst for broader investigations into corporate development fraud. Journalists uncovered dozens of companies using tactics similar to Brightview's. The Hendersons, who had stood by Sarah from the beginning, opened their home as a meeting place for visiting community organizers. Their living room became command central for a growing movement of neighborhood protection groups. "It's not just about stopping bad developers," Mrs. Henderson said during one meeting. "It's about preserving the character of our communities, protecting our histories, and defending our right to choose how our neighborhoods grow." Local officials, many previously intimidated by corporate interests, found new courage. The city council passed stringent regulations on development projects. Building inspectors, freed from corporate pressure, began rigorous enforcement of housing codes. Support came from unexpected places. Former Brightview employees, inspired by Rachel's example, started coming forward with evidence about other companies. Real estate agents, tired of corporate pressure, formed an alliance dedicated to ethical development practices. The Pine Valley Woods community itself transformed. What began as a defensive alliance against Brightview became a model of neighborhood cooperation. Residents organized workshops on community rights, property law, and corporate fraud detection. Sarah's architectural expertise proved valuable beyond her own case. She began helping other communities document their architectural heritage, making it harder for developers to dismiss neighborhoods as underutilized or deteriorating. As support grew, the movement evolved beyond just fighting corporate developers. Communities began developing their own improvement plans, taking control of their future development. Sarah's team helped create templates for community-led planning that protected neighborhood character while allowing for sustainable growth. The garage demolition site, once a symbol of corporate bullying, became a gathering place for community organizing. Plans for its reconstruction included a small community center where residents could meet, share information, and coordinate responses to development threats. What happened here changed everything, Sarah told a group of visiting activists. We showed that when communities stand together, even the most powerful corporations can be held accountable. The growth in support brought resources they desperately needed. Legal defense funds were established. Technical experts volunteered their services. Community foundations offered grants for neighborhood protection initiatives. Most importantly, the fear that had gripped so many communities began to fade. People realized they weren't powerless against corporate interests. The Pine Valley Woods victory showed them there was a way to fight back and win. The final resolution came 6 months after Victoria Blackwood's arrest. The federal court's verdict was devastating for Brightview Development. The company was found guilty on all counts, including racketeering, fraud, and criminal conspiracy. Victoria Blackwood and her top executives received lengthy prison sentences. Judge Harrison's final ruling went beyond criminal penalties. Brightview's assets were permanently seized, with hundreds of millions allocated for community restitution. Every property they had acquired through fraudulent means was returned to its original owners. Their entire corporate structure was dismantled. Sarah's rebuilt garage rose from the rubble better than before. The insurance settlement and court-ordered restitution funded not just its reconstruction, but the restoration of her classic cars. The new structure included a community meeting space, becoming a symbol of their victory. This isn't just about punishing wrongdoers, David explained during the final hearing. It's about restoring communities and preventing this from happening again. The court established a trust fund for neighborhood protection, funded by Brightview's seized assets. The investigation expanded, leading to the resignation of corrupt officials and the overhaul of local development regulations. New laws, dubbed the Community Protection Acts, made it harder for corporations to abuse development rights or create fraudulent HOAs. Rachel Collins emerged from witness protection to help implement the reforms. "We've created a template for fighting corporate abuse," she told Sarah as they toured the restored neighborhood. "Other communities won't have to face what we did." Pine Valley Woods flourished under the new protections. Property values stabilized. The neighborhood's character remained intact. Most importantly, residents no longer lived in fear of corporate takeovers. The garage reconstruction project became a community effort. Neighbors contributed their skills and resources. The Classic Car Club resumed its meetings, bigger than ever. The space became a living reminder of their successful fight. Sarah's documentation of their battle became a manual for other communities. The Pine Valley Protocol was adopted by neighborhoods nationwide. Their security network expanded into a national system for monitoring corporate development threats. The final piece fell into place when federal regulators used their case to create new guidelines for corporate development. The Brightview regulations established strict requirements for community consent and transparent development practices. Standing in her restored garage, surrounded by her rebuilt classic cars and community members, Sarah realized they had achieved more than just stopping one corrupt corporation. They had changed how development would happen in communities across the country. "We didn't just win a fight," she told her gathered neighbors. "We created a legacy of protection for neighborhoods everywhere." The victory was complete. Brightview was finished, their threats neutralized, their damage undone. More importantly, they had shown that determined communities could stand up to corporate power and win. As Sarah closed the garage doors that evening, she smiled at the small plaque they had installed. "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world." Pine Valley Woods, 2025. 1 year after Brightview's defeat, Sarah sat in her restored garage, surrounded by her rebuilt classic cars, reflecting on how much had changed. The space was no longer just her personal sanctuary. It had become a symbol of community resistance and triumph. Working on the engine of her Boss 429, she thought about the lessons learned. The fight had transformed her from an architect who valued privacy into a community leader who understood the power of collective action. Her technical skills had proven crucial, but it was her ability to unite people that made the difference. "You know," Mrs. Henderson said, bringing her usual Saturday morning coffee, "watching you stand up to them gave everyone courage. You showed us what one person could start." The garage walls now displayed photos documenting their battle, the demolition, the protests, the victory celebration. But mixed among them were new images: neighborhood gatherings, car club meetings, planning, sessions for other communities seeking help. Sarah's architecture practice had evolved too. She now specialized in community preservation projects, helping neighborhoods protect their character while adapting to change. Her experience fighting Brightview had given her unique insights into how development could serve communities rather than destroy them. "It's funny," she told Martha during their weekly strategy session. "I bought this place wanting solitude. Now I can't imagine not being connected to the community." The neighborhood had changed subtly but significantly. Property values had increased, but not through corporate manipulation. Instead, the area had become known for its strong community bonds and resident-driven improvements. Other neighborhoods sought to replicate their success. Her relationship with her classic cars had shifted too. While still precious to her, they now represented something bigger: the importance of preserving what matters, whether it's vintage automobiles or neighborhood character. The experience had taught her that true strength wasn't in isolation, but in connection. The garage she had rebuilt wasn't just a structure, it was a testament to the power of people standing together against corporate greed. "We didn't just save our homes," she reflected during a community meeting. "We found our voice. We discovered who we really are." As she closed up the garage that evening, Sarah realized that losing her original garage had led to gaining something far more valuable: a deep understanding of community, justice, and the power of determined resistance. Looking at her restored Boss 429, she smiled. Sometimes you had to lose something to find what you really needed. Her quest for privacy had led to discovering the strength of community, and there was no going back. 2 years after Brightview's defeat, Sarah hosted a national conference of community activists in her rebuilt garage, now expanded into a proper community center. Representatives from across the country gathered to share stories and strategies for protecting neighborhood rights. What happened here wasn't just about stopping one corporation, Sarah addressed the packed room. It was about recognizing that our communities are worth fighting for, that ordinary people can stand up to powerful interests and win. The garage walls now served as a teaching tool, displaying a timeline of their battle against Brightview alongside success stories from other neighborhoods. Each photo, document, and artifact told part of a larger story about community empowerment and corporate accountability. Rachel Collins, now heading a national organization for community protection, joined Sarah at the podium. "The Pine Valley Protocol isn't just a defense strategy," she explained. "It's a blueprint for community-led development. We're not just stopping bad actors, we're changing how neighborhood development happens." The impact of their victory had rippled far beyond Pine Valley Woods. New laws in multiple states now required community consent for major development projects. Corporate developers had to prove their plans benefited existing residents, not just investors. The term Brightview tactics had become shorthand for corporate bullying that needed to be stopped. Sarah's garage, once a target for destruction, had become a symbol of resistance and renewal. The classic cars she'd restored were more than just vehicles. They represented the value of preserving what matters to communities, whether tangible or intangible. "The most important lesson," Sarah told the gathered activists, "is that no community is powerless. When we stand together, document everything, and refuse to be intimidated, we can protect what matters most: our homes, our neighborhoods, our ways of life. The conference concluded with the establishment of a national network of community protection groups, all following the principles they'd developed during their fight. The garage that Brightview had tried to destroy had become the birthplace of a movement. Looking out at her neighborhood that evening, Sarah reflected on how their local victory had grown into something far larger. They hadn't just saved one garage or one neighborhood, they'd created a model for communities everywhere to defend themselves against corporate overreach. The final photo added to her garage wall showed not destruction or conflict, but a community, gathered together, strong and united. Below it, a simple caption read, "Every community has the right to choose its own future. Pine Valley Woods showed us how to fight for that right." Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.